Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the story mode. If you've just discovered this channel or you're finding it through Star Wars Lads, which is the other channel that I'm on where we talk Star Wars, I haven't posted a video on this channel in a long time. It's been about what 8 months or so, and I talked about Marvel films, and I want to get back into posting more stuff on here. I just haven't had the time, but now I'd like to make the time, especially because Batman just came out. The Batman, I should say, with Robert Pattinson, and that was a it was a movie we were all waiting for a long time. And so Batman is one of my favorite things in the world. He's my favorite fictional character. I've said that many times, and I just wanted to talk about the films. So today we will be doing a tier list like last time. I enjoy doing these tier lists, and I'm planning on getting a lot more of these and a lot of variety of categories up on this channel so I can talk about some other things. So we talk about Star Wars over on the Star Wars Lads channel. If you want to check that out, it is linked to this channel's page. But today we're going to talk about the Batman movies and specifically theatrical releases. So we're looking at the movies that were widely released theatrically. So there's not going to be like The Killing Joke got a theatrical release, but it was a limited 1 day thing. Same with Batman and Harley Quinn, that awful animated movie. And other things. We're also not talking about movies that don't have Batman in the title. So even though Batman is a relatively large part of Justice League or Zack Snyder's The Justice League, we're not going to talk about it here. We're also not going to talk about any of the direct to video DC animated Batman movies. I feel like that's a list for a separate time, even though a lot of those are really great. So we're only talking about the theatrical releases that have Batman in the name. So to run these down before we start, I like to do quotes for my tier list. So the top one, I think these are going to be the movies that to me embody Batman the most. These are the best of the best. So I went for I'm Batman. And then we've got the hero we deserve, but not the one we need right now. The ones that are very, very good, but maybe not the top of the tier. Holy mediocrity Batman is the middle tier. And then you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. I think that one's pretty self explanatory. And then what killed the franchise? The Ice Age. Yeah, I think we all know what one's going to go there. So we'll kick off the list with the first ever Batman theatrical release, and that is Batman the movie from 1966. I rewatched all these movies before the Batman came out, and I love this movie. It's so much fun. It's so different than anything else we've seen. It embodies Batman perfectly from the time period in the 60s, in the late 50s, the early Silver Age Batman, and really the late Golden Age Batman. It was goofy. It was all really goofy. And this really nails the tone. And the jokes and the humor, absolutely fantastic. It's a hilarious movie. The writing is so good. It is genuinely so brilliant. And these writers should get so much credit for what they did because it actually is hilarious. If you're watching this and you're trying to compare it to The Dark Knight, obviously it's not it's not the same tone at all. It's not what they're going for. You can't watch this and go, "Oh, well, that was dumb," because it's funny. It's supposed to be funny, and the jokes are so good. I'm actually going to put this might surprise some people. I'm going to put this in the hero we deserve, but not the one we need right now. I think this movie is really, really good. I like that movie so much. Every time I watch it, I like it even more. So next, we're talking about 1989 Batman with Jack Nicholson and Michael Keaton. So I go back and forth on this one sometimes. I think everything about this movie visually is phenomenal. It might be the second best, at least aesthetically, to the Batman. Maybe that might be the only one that has a little bit better aesthetics. But the vision here, Tim Burton's vision on this film is absolutely flawless. He executes it so well. Every single set is so phenomenal. But the thing that takes this movie over the top for me and it really raises the bar is Jack Nicholson as Joker. I mean, it genuinely, besides the Mark Hamill one, in live action, Jack Nicholson's Joker is by far the closest in terms of his personality to the comic books, by far. And I don't think really anybody can argue with that. Heath Ledger's is very good. He's an agent of chaos, all this stuff. And it's a lot of elements that they've now adopted into the Joker character post Heath Ledger because it was so popular. But before there's those elements are there, but the Joker is also the guy who's going to run around the city and just shoot people like with a smile. Like he's funny, and in his own deranged way, he's thinks he's a comedian by doing what he's doing. So Honestly, it's a great portrayal. I don't love that Joker killed Batman's parents. I think for me, anytime you take somebody and elevate them to killing the Waynes, it takes a little bit of that mystique away. The point is of the Wayne's death is that it's random. Can anybody can get killed at any time by a criminal, and that's why Batman's war on crime it never ends. And so to me, when you try to make some connection to the lore by doing that, for me, that falls flat. Michael Keaton as Batman is really good in this. I think physically he's quite good. He is imposing when you see those close-ups. Sometimes they do a little bit of goofy stuff with it. It comes across as a little cheesy in moments. Obviously, the fact that he can't really move his upper body or his neck does make it a little dated, especially comparing it to some earlier ones. But I think for the most part, the stories, the aesthetic, Jack Nicholson, everything else about it is really phenomenal, honestly. And I do think I like it just a slightly more than Batman the movie. And I'm also going to put it in the hero we deserve, but not the one we need right now. So the next one we're going to talk about is Batman Returns, which to me is a little bit of an overrated movie, if I do say so myself. I think it's still a good movie. All the Tim Burton sensibilities are still there. We still have the aesthetics, which look very nice. There's some crazy, wacky set pieces, like the one with the penguins at the end. Uh, there's some really interesting ideas here. Not a massive fan of Danny DeVito's Penguin. I think he does a great job playing the version that he's playing. Obviously, it's not close to the comic books at all. It's very strange, very weird, and comes across more of like a Tim Burton creature feature type of thing than it really does Batman. But I think it works for the most part. And same with Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman. She is so good in this movie. She's incredible in her performance, but it's not really like she doesn't really play Catwoman, at least like the Catwoman I know from the comics, like the one I'm familiar with. She's she's very Tim Burton-y as well, but her performance knocks it out of the park. So like you can forgive, even as somebody who prefers when they go closer to the comic books, you can forgive and kind of see the alternate take there because she is so good as the character. Michael Keaton in this one is completely sidelined. He has barely anything to do, and it's not really his movie. It's all about the villains. That's one of the major complaints with all the Tim Burton movies, for the most part, is they don't really focus on Batman. They kind of focus on all the villains. This one has its moments. Aesthetically, everything's still good. There's a great scene between Bruce Wayne and Selena Kyle on the dance, on the ballroom dancing scene, which they kind of mimic for The Dark Knight Rises. Still a good movie, but I think it's our first holy mediocrity Batman because it does fall flat in a lot of areas that it really could excel. So next we're going to talk about Batman Forever, which is one that, excuse the pun, I have not seen in forever until I watched it this year. Oh man. So this movie's interesting because you can tell that Joel Schumacher is trying to throw it back to the 1960s Batman. He's trying to give an homage to that style, but it feels so weird because he's still adopting the aesthetics of Tim Burton. Most likely that was a studio choice. Most likely it was because they're like, okay, the Tim Burton movies worked and we want to keep that same aesthetic because everybody liked that version. So let's keep a similar costume, a similar design, make everything similar. But then also, Joel Schumacher tries to add a weird, wacky sensibility and it just clashes really way too much for me, in my opinion. Tommy Lee Jones as Two Face in this movie is absolutely ridiculous. It's absurd. I don't know what he was going for. I don't know what they were going for with Joel Schumacher's take on Two Face. It's bad. The Riddler is a little bit closer to like the Frank Gorshin version from the 60s, so I can kind of see what they're going for, but it is still way too much Jim Carrey, and he really doesn't do much riddling. He's not intimidating. It's I really don't like the Riddler in this movie, but at least I can kind of see what they're going for. Where Two Face just feels completely out of left field, and then when the two of them are on screen, it's just absolute madness. It's a disaster. One of the redeeming qualities of this film, though, is Val Kilmer. He's actually quite good as Batman, besides his suit, which looks okay from the neck up, but this is the first one to add nipples to the bat suit. But he is actually pretty good both as Bruce Wayne and as Batman, and I think I buy him a lot as Bruce Wayne. He's definitely, out of all the actors that have played Bruce Wayne, he kind of embodies that version of the suave billionaire more than anybody else. And his physicality is so much better than Michael Keaton's. And I don't know if that's a tribute to him or maybe the suit was a little bit easier to function in, but his fight scenes are a lot more believable. Chris O'Donnell as Robin is I appreciate what they were going for, but it doesn't work. Most of this movie doesn't work for me, even though I enjoyed it more than I think I did the first time I watched it. There's some hilarious extra scenes in this. Like, I mean, like extras that are in the movie. The one guy that goes, "Oh no, it's boiling acid," and the other guy who goes like, "Yeah, Batman, yeah." Those are absolutely hilarious. But I mean, I think it's unintentional camp. I don't know, but I'm gonna put this in: you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. I think it's pretty apt, especially comparing it to Batman, Batman Returns, and then Batman Forever. It progressively gets worse. And yeah, they kind of kept it going for a little too long, and some of the choices they made just did not work. I believe actually Mask of the Phantasm came out earlier, so I should have talked about that first. But Mask of the Phantasm, this movie is so good. It is so good. And I know some people, you'll watch it and you'll be like, it's animated, you know, it's quick, it's only like 70 minutes long. They don't really focus on Batman. This is a Bruce Wayne story, and to me, it's the best Bruce Wayne story that's ever been put to film. It's absolutely fantastic. And there's a scene, oh my gosh, there's a scene in by Bruce Wayne's parents' grave, and I think most of you will know what I'm talking about. It's in a flashback right when he's thinking about proposing to Andrea, and he's in the graveyard and he is talking to his parents and he falls on his knees and he says, I didn't expect to be happy. And I feel like that one scene embodies Bruce Wayne more than anything else that anyone's ever done. I don't understand why creators today making, you know, whether it's Matt Reeves with the Batman or Zack Snyder with his movies or Christopher Nolan even, I don't understand why people don't look at the work that Bruce Timm and Paul Dini did. It's so good. It captures the characters so well. And not just in this movie, but across Batman the Animated Series, the new Batman Adventures, uh, Justice League Unlimited. It's so good, and this movie is absolutely fantastic. Mark Hamill is the Joker, so good. Kevin Conroy is my favorite Batman. I can't not put this in I'm Batman. I think even if you think it's not the quality of some live action movies because it has limitations, it's animation. But even if you think it's not there, to me, as a Batman fan, as somebody who loves Batman comics and really wants them to nail the character, because I don't feel like they've yet fully nailed all the aspects of Batman in any version, this is the best we've got. And I think if somehow, if some way we could transition this to live action, this Batman, this version of Bruce Wayne, I think we'd finally nail it. So I'm going to move on now to Batman and Robin in a completely opposite sense. So this one tries to distance itself even further from the Burton universe. The aesthetics are even brighter and more colorful. Some of the actors said they felt like they were shooting a toy commercial. It feels like that. I mean, this everybody knows this movie. I named the last category after it. It's awful. This movie is terrible. There's not one redeeming aspect about this. George Clooney is awful. Uma Thurman's awful. Arnold Schwarzenegger's awful. Batgirl is awful. Alfred's off. Everything is terrible about this movie. There is not a redeeming plot point. The only thing that's slightly redeeming is it is so bad that it actually is one of those movies that's so bad it's good. If you can get some friends together and you watch this movie and you can have a good time. I know my friends and I definitely say a lot of these lines. There's some hilarious moments in this, and it's unintentional hilarity. Yes, you could argue that he's going for the campy 60s aesthetic, but I think he's going for it, but I think he doesn't hit it. It's not well-written jokes. Like the 1960s Batman has hilarious, well-written, campy jokes that are intentionally campy. This movie is bad, so bad it's good in the moments when it's trying to be good, and then the jokes fall flat just in general. Like the jokes don't work. It's the moments that aren't supposed to be jokes that are actually hilarious. So it's terrible, and I'm going to put what killed the franchise, the Ice Age, because Batman was basically dead for 8 years after this until we got Batman Begins. Batman Begins, I think, is I'm not going to say the best Batman movie, but I think it embodies the character of Batman and Bruce Wayne the best out of the live action versions we've gotten. Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne in this is really strong. I think the liberties they take with the comics work for the most part. The Elseworlds style version of Bruce and the League of Shadows instead of the League of Assassins, all of that works quite well. I think Liam Neeson is really good as Raj Al Ghul. I think Scarecrow, Killian Murphy is actually really good in this movie as Scarecrow. I wanted more, but I think the scenes he's in are all really cool. I think Nolan had some great ideas visually for how to do Scarecrow. And this movie it gets better, honestly, every time I watch it. I think it understands Batman and at least the comic book side of Batman better than the rest of Nolan's trilogy. Even if it's not the best of the trilogy, it still understands that side, and I kind of appreciate it for being this like grounded, more realistic take, but yet it still embraces its comic side. I love this version of Gotham as well. I think this is one of the best versions of Gotham. I'd say it's probably my second favorite. I would say the Batman is the best, and I'd say it's my second favorite, right above Tim Burton's in the first Batman movie, just because that one does kind of feel like it's coming out of a cartoon. At times, it feels a little bit too modelly, too staged, too painted. And yes, that is kind of a victim of the times because they weren't able to use CGI. But besides the dated CGI in the Batman Begins, I think everything's really, really strong about this movie. And I would put it in I'm Batman because I think it is one of the best Batman movies. And it is the most complete Batman movie, at least if you're including Bruce and Batman, as well as Gordon. There's a great Gordon origin story type thing here. It's a really good adaptation of Batman and Gordon side of year one, even though it leaves out Catwoman. So next we're going to talk about The Dark Knight. I mean, yeah, I mean, we all know The Dark Knight is one of the greatest films of all time. It's consensus the greatest superhero movie of all time for most people. It's a masterpiece. The Heath Ledger is absolutely phenomenal, and I think a lot of people sometimes there's detractors against The Dark Knight because they're like, oh, all you remember is Heath Ledger. No, it's a brilliantly paced thriller. It works so well. It's one of those movies that's 2.5 hours and it's over before you know it. Christian Bale as Batman, the physicality in this one is so much better. His fight scenes are so much more believable, but it's also the mental games between Bruce and the Joker. We also get to see a little bit more of Bruce's detective side in here, which I know people are acting like the Batman revolutionized that, and it did. It made it a detective movie, a Seven style movie. But you do get to see a lot of detective work in here as Batman tries to uncover the mystery of the Joker. Joker does act as a form of a serial killer in this. The mob stuff, all the politics. I mean, I could just name scene after scene that even some of the scenes that are lesser remembered, like the one at the end when Batman's taking down the clowns and the doctors. That's a brilliant scene. It's such a good action scene, and it's just a great idea, honestly. And the whole morality between the boats, the car chase when Harvey is in the police van. I mean, that's one of the best car chases in movie history. The interrogation scene's the best Batman scene ever filmed. That whole montage when they're trying to go rescue Rachel and Harvey Dent, and Two-Face is a great part of this movie. I think the Harvey Dent story works really, really well. Aaron Eckhart is a great Harvey Dent, a great Two-Face. All of it seamlessly works. Like there's not sometimes in the Nolan movies there are a couple plot points that you're like, you kind of added that. Maybe the studio wanted you to add that, or maybe you tried to fit that in, but it didn't necessarily work. This movie, every single piece works. Every single piece fits so well together. And it's just a perfect movie. It's a perfect sequel. It's the best Batman movie that's ever come out. So now we're going to talk about The Dark Knight Rises. The Dark Knight Rises is a tough one because honestly, this was one of my favorite Batman movies that I love this movie personally on a personal level. Saw it 5 times in the theaters. It's one of the movies I was most anticipating in my life going to see. And I thought it lives up to the hype for the most part on rewatches. Yes, it has gotten a little worse over the years where like when I saw this, I was like, yes, that's one of the best movies I've ever seen. And now I'm like, it's not one of the best movies I've ever seen, but I think it's still a great Batman movie. The scope of this film, oh my gosh, like you can say Avengers Endgame is the biggest superhero movie ever made. The Dark Knight Rises is technically the biggest superhero movie ever made. The scope of this movie, the practical effects, the practical fight sequences, the stuff they do. I mean, the the airplane scene is one of the greatest action scenes ever in movie history. The one at the beginning of the movie, because some of the stunts they do with that was all practical. That's all real. like, can you imagine flying 2 airplanes, connecting them, all that stuff. Obviously, like, the things that are happening inside the airplane are on a stage filmed on a stage, but I mean, come on, Christopher Nolan, there's another level to his filmmaking, and I think he this is the biggest budget he's probably ever had. I think he does get a little over ambitious in parts. The story at the end is a little too fast. It doesn't wrap up quite as well as it probably should. It's a movie that feels like it needs another 45 minutes, even though it's almost 3 hours long. But I think everything works extremely well here. One of the most underrated parts is Anne Hathaway's Catwoman, who I think was the best version of comic book Catwoman, honestly, until Zoe Kravitz's version in the new one. The Dark Knight Rises is a great movie, and I think it's suffered from the amazing reviews that it got at the beginning, and then people coming after who didn't watch it when the hype was out and being like, "This is not even close to as good as you're saying." And there's not as much of a middle ground as there should be because I think it's easily for me like a top 5 Batman movie. I'm putting it at the top of the hero we deserve, but not the one we need right now. It has enough flaws to put it there, but I personally just absolutely love this movie. It's one of my favorite superhero movies of all time. So next we've got a very controversial one, Batman versus Superman. Batman versus Superman is an interesting film. It is more of a Batman movie than a Superman movie. Honestly, the main characters of the movie might be Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. Sadly, I there's a lot to like about Ben Affleck's Batman in this. I think physically, maybe until the Pattinson one, he embodies the rough violence of Batman. And I still think that scene in the warehouse when he's saving Martha Kent is the greatest Batman action scene ever filmed. It feels the most like a comic book. It's he uses all his gadgets, he's punching people. There is in the Ultimate Edition, there's very unnecessary blood splatters added because it just makes it look like Batman murdering people, which he murders a lot of people in this, which is definitely a problem I have with it. He's also branding people, which I think is strange. Like I think Zack Snyder goes a little overboard in some of the darkness of this. Like even the Dark Knight Returns Batman is not this violent, this dark. Like he's pessimistic, but he's not this aggressively violent. Of course, the Martha thing does not work. I'd say the last 45 minutes of this movie is where it completely falls apart. I think the Ultimate Edition does a lot to paper over the problems I have with the Superman part in the theatrical release. It gives Superman a bit more of a reason for why they want to fight. I think the fight lives up to the hype for the most part. It's over kind of quickly, but for the most part, it works. As a Batman fan, like I like Superman a lot, but as a Batman fan, the outcome was what I wanted. Uh, yeah, I like this movie more than most people do, I would say, but it's still to me, some people think it's a masterpiece. I don't see that at all. It's very, very flawed, even the Ultimate Edition. And other people think it's one of the worst superhero movies of all time, which I also completely disagree with. So I'm going to put it in holy mediocrity Batman. I think it's a little worse than Batman Returns because it's not as complete, but it's still got a lot of redeeming qualities. Don't love the portrayal of Batman's morals and ethics in it, but the physicality of Ben Affleck, I think, is really strong here. But it goes way off the rails in Justice League. I don't even want to talk about Justice League. At least the theatrical version is that's the maybe the worst portrayal of Batman ever, next to George Clooney. Okay, so finally, the Batman. I'm gonna throw the Batman up here, and I'm Batman, and I don't think that's gonna surprise a lot of you who are watching this because I mean it's a great movie. It's a fantastic Batman movie. Great, great detective work. The Riddler is a solid villain. I think the mystery works really well. My favorite part, honestly, might be Carmine Falcone. I think John Turturro's Carmine Falcone was something I was really looking forward to, and they didn't market it at all, which I found kind of strange. I thought maybe he was just in one or two scenes. He's in a lot of this movie, and I don't want to spoil much because there might be some of you who haven't seen it, but I loved what they did with him. I also loved Colin Farrell's Penguin. I was a little concerned about it when they cast him and all of that. I don't like to jump to conclusions, obviously, because you want to see the what the filmmaker's vision is, but he's great. I love the Penguin in this movie. Zoe Kravitz, Catwoman. I think I still want a little bit more of her, but she's phenomenal in every scene. She looks exactly like Catwoman, at least the Catwoman of the last 20 something years. So that was amazing. And Robert Pattinson is a great Batman. My biggest flaw with the film is its lack of Bruce Wayne moments, its lack of Alfred moments. It doesn't get under the cowl. We don't really learn anything about Bruce. We don't really learn any reason why he's doing what he's doing other than the obvious my parents were killed. There's nothing to him. He's always Batman. And I guess that is part of the point of this film is him transitioning from that kind of back into society. But at the same time, I feel like it hurts the character because this movie relies a lot on our knowledge, prior knowledge of the comics and of the other films and our relationship with Batman and Bruce Wayne, because he's the one character that doesn't really evolve. But Batman as a symbol evolves. And I think that is something Reeves really understands at the first, so not the very first scene, if you guys know what I'm talking about, but the scene after that on Halloween. Oh my god, that is such a well done, true understanding of the Batman character. I loved that, and I did really like the ending. I thought the ending, at least the message of the ending, really works. There are flaws in this movie for sure. It's not a perfect film, but I think it's as close physically to Batman as we'll ever get. Like I said, Ben Affleck, that one scene is great. This movie, the whole thing is great in the fight scenes, the Batmobile stuff, all of it is really, really strong. I think it rides the line between comic-y and real world pretty well. I'm wondering what the sequel will do, which direction they choose to go, because obviously Nolan did that with his first film and then chose to go in the more grounded, realistic version, which worked really well in the first one, and then had some of its flaws in the first sequel, and then had some flaws in the second sequel. Who knows? But I thought this was a great movie, and honestly, I'm very comfortable putting it up with these other three movies and slightly above The Dark Knight Rises. Like, I'd love to put The Dark Knight Rises up here because I love that movie, but yeah, I think in terms of quality, this is a solid look at the list. Okay, and just as an addendum before you all shout at me in the comments, I did completely forget the Lego Batman movie. I don't know how I forgot it, but I did forget it. So now I've got it on the list. Where would I put it? I'm gonna put it in the hero we deserve, but not the one we need right now. I think I'd probably put it towards the end of that. I think it's a really good movie. It does lean into the comedy, obviously, like Lego movies do, and it nails the comedy. It's a really funny movie. Will Arnett's a very good Batman. It nails the Batman and Joker relationship, even if it is coming from a little bit over the top comedic level. I think it understands the themes of what Batman is. I think it does it quite well. Obviously, I prefer a little bit more serious take on the character, and I think that's why personally I would put it down a little lower. I could completely understand if you have it a little higher, but for me, that's kind of where I'm at. I enjoyed the movie a lot. I've seen it a couple times, but it has been a long time since I've watched it, and I didn't rewatch it on my rewatch. So yes, it's a fun movie. Definitely like it a lot, and I'm definitely putting it in the top 8 Batman movies. But I think right towards the bottom of the hero we deserve, but not the one we need right now, is where I'm looking at for the Lego Batman movie. So thank you all so much for watching this list. I'm hoping to put out more. I'm going to do a ranking of the Jokers at one point. I'm also going to do a ranking of the actors who played Batman. So you're going to want to check all those out. I'm going to have a lot more Batman stuff up here. Obviously, Batman's my favorite fictional character. I've said it a lot of times to a lot of people. So I am excited to further what we're doing on this channel and hopefully put out some more variety of content, because I love to talk about other things besides just Star Wars. But if you want to listen to me talk about Star Wars, check out Star Wars Lads, which is our main YouTube channel. You can follow us on there, subscribe to the channel, give us a like, both on here and on there. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.